Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a live chat. It has been so long since I've done one of these, but thank you guys for joining us. I'm really excited about today's chat. And we have a special guest today. This is Claire Thieker Brown. She is the founder of Unbelts, which is a really amazing local company in my hometown, and I will get her to tell you guys more about that. She also, though, is B Corp certified. And I've heard her talk before on panels about ethical fashion and her B Corp certification. And I thought it'd be really amazing to have her as a guest to tell us all about that because I'm sure you guys have come across the little B Corp logo on companies' websites. And I know a lot of people know that, yeah, it looks just like that, the little B in the circle. And I know that people know that it's a good thing, but I feel like a lot of us don't necessarily know a ton about what it actually means and how a brand gets certified. So we're going to chat about that today. And I would love to hear from you guys in the comments, like how familiar you are with a B Corp, if you've seen the logo before, if you know anything about it. That'd be great so we kind of know just, I don't know, what sort of level to get into. And also, of course, if you guys have any questions for Claire throughout this process, please pop them in the chat and we'll get to them later on. Yeah, so I'm super excited to learn a lot more about B Corp. So thank you, Claire, so much for joining us. And I think let's start right off with maybe you can give us a bit of an introduction about yourself and about Unbelts.
Sure, sure. So Unbelt is a company that I started really small about 8 years ago from my living room in Shanghai when I was living over in China. And I started the company. There were kind of two reasons that I started it. One is that my weight was fluctuating all the time when I lived there. I don't know, it was like getting older. It was eating a lot of dumplings. But at that time, 2011, there weren't as many Western fashion, like apparel stores in China. And it was really hard to find pants that were my size. And I needed a belt to kind of bridge the gap between what I needed and what I was able to buy there. But I didn't want extra bulk. And so I ended up just going to local markets and getting some elastic and buckles and kind of fashioning a sort of no bulk belt that would keep my pants up, but without any extra bumps under my t-shirts. So that was one goal, make my pants fit without adding extra stuff around my middle because there was already a lot there from all those noodles. And the other goal was to see if I could change people's minds about what made in China could mean. Because I had been living there for about 3 years when I started Unbelts. And, the reputation that Made in China has earned was just not matching up with my experience of the quality and workman or workwomanship that was available, including right in my neighborhood. There were women who were amazing sewers who didn't have full-time work. And I thought, okay, can I create a product that people need, and can I have it made by people who are compensated fairly and who have really extraordinary skills? So that's where it started, and it just kind of grew from there. And I moved back to Edmonton in 2014, have been growing the business from here, but we still have our kind of two hometowns, Edmonton and Shanghai.
That's really awesome. And I think, well, first of all, two things. I honestly almost always feel like the best products come out of just need. Like someone's like, "Oh, I need this thing," right? And then
A little desperation.
yeah. But that's awesome. And actually on that note too, like this is just as a side note, my husband loves your Intrepid belt so much. He has had so many issues with belts, like always poking through his clothes because he carries stuff all the time for work, and he found his t-shirt was always rubbing against the buckle of the belt.
Little holes.
Yeah, and he would always have these tiny little holes in the front of his shirt. And so, yeah, so the fact that your belt buckle is really flat is just incredibly practical, and he loves that so much.
Plus, like, hashtag stretchable life. Like,
Yeah, definitely. And I also really appreciate that you do talk quite a bit, and we can get more into this, I think, later, that you do talk a lot about Made in China and how, we have this kind of stigma or this like conception that this is somehow a bad thing. And I know that I've talked to people who have said that, oh, I try to only buy products that are like made in North America or made in Europe. But we're finding out more and more that there are pretty extreme sweatshop ethical issues in these countries. And just because something is made in a country like China or even in countries like Bangladesh, where we hear about a lot of issues, there are still people that are manufacturing in a fair and ethical way. And so this whole made in label like doesn't really tell us anything.
No, it's really limited. I love talking about that. So yeah, and any of your, I know this can be a pretty hot button issue that surprises a lot of people. It brings up a lot of questions. So if we talk about it later on, then if anyone who's watching now has some questions, maybe there'll be time for them to kind of like type them in, and then we can answer them.
Yeah, definitely. So if you guys have any questions about made in China, her manufacturing in China, for sure add those to the comments because we'd love to get into that a bit too. But let's get into our topic, which is B Corps. And I think first of all, why did you decide to get B Corp certified in the first place?
Yeah. Okay, so we got certified in 2015. So I started the certification process just after I moved back to Canada. And the reason I decided to go for it was that, when I moved back to Canada, I was seeing the kind of the seeds of an ethical fashion movement starting to be planted. When I started Unbelts in 2011, 12, the sustainable fashion it was still like, really kind of like crunchy, hemp stuff, and by the time I moved back to Canada, it was starting to be way bigger companies like H&M talking about conscious collections and sustainability. And I thought, okay, on one hand, this is great, but on the other hand, there's a lot of opacity as to what companies are actually doing. And we have been that was basically and and one assistant. I've been working my butt off for almost 4 years to build a business in a way that I felt good about. And it meant slower growth, it meant more expensive growth, lower margins. And I thought, I'll be damned if people look at Unbelts saying we're ethically manufactured and looking at H&M kind of ethical washing, we're ethically manufactured, and having the same skepticism to both us and them. I thought what we really need is we really need a third party to sign off on what we're doing. And I want to go through a rigorous auditing process to see where we measure up, and to be able to give our customers confidence that we are doing what we say we're doing. And so that was really the reason that I wanted to go for B Corp certification. And the really cool thing about B Corp is that it doesn't just certify your products, it certifies your operations. So it's a really kind of holistic view of the kind of business that you're running, not just in what you're producing, but also in how you are living out your values as a member of your community at large. And that was just really in line with the kind of business I wanted to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, and yeah, that's something I'd love to dig into a little bit more too, is the idea of like why someone might want to get certified and how that kind of, lets you compare businesses. But before we jump into that, let's actually go over, so what exactly does the B Corp certification cover? Because like you said, it is a very holistic approach. And so I guess like as a consumer, if we're just looking at a brand and we see the B Corp certification, what does that tell us about a company?
Okay. So a B Corp certification tells you that a company is third party verified to be upholding the highest standards for environmental and social sustainability. When you complete the B Corp certification process, your performance is measured in 4 areas. In your customers, like the kind of products that you're providing, your workers, how you're treating your team and your entire supply chain, your community, what you're doing to give back to it, and then governance. So, how is your what does the composition of your leadership, how does it reflect diversity and inclusivity, and how is business conducted internally, including in your legal corporation documents, to show that you are committed, for the long haul, operating for people, planet, and profit. So, so one really cool thing about B Corp certification is that it doesn't matter what industry you're in. We're an apparel industry B Corp, but Ben and Jerry's is a food and beverage industry B Corp. They're huge, we're small. But the B Corp community itself is really, really inclusive. And I really like that they're walking that walk, or walking that talk. So it means that it's quite cool when I go to B Corp conferences. Means that everyone around me is values aligned, and it doesn't matter whether my company is making $150,000, $15 million, $150 million in revenue. There's a level playing field where we're all able to participate in the same community at the same level.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a good kind of community around B Corp in particular, that I haven't really seen around other businesses. But I guess like another thing that I'm curious about is, because so many businesses have such different products, such different approaches, how does it, like, how are they sort of able to kind of compare a food company versus an apparel company in terms of metrics? Because I know that B Corp does give you like a rating, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and so then, like, are there a certain types of metrics that score differently, or how exactly does that work?
So to certify as a B Corp, you have to take the B Corp impact assessment. And as a side note, the impact assessment is public and anyone can take it. I think like over 50,000 businesses have taken it. And it's a really cool roadmap on how to make your business more socially and environmentally sustainable, whether or not you're certifying as a B Corp. So it's on bcorporation.net. It's the impact assessment, super cool tool. And the assessment, though, it changes depending on your industry. So the questions that I'm asked as an apparel company are different than what, say, Ben and Jerry's would be asked, or different than what, say, a legal consulting service would be asked. Yeah, so I'm because I've only taken mine, I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly how they vary. But what I imagine is that, if you are, for example, there's a really cool company in Vancouver that consults with businesses on how to become more trans inclusive. Well, their impact assessment isn't going to have any questions on their supply chain, right?
Yeah.
Products are. They don't offer products. So that's how B Lab, which is the certifying body, that's how they're able to kind of take apples and oranges and bananas and plums and kind of assess them in a way that is fair.
Okay, yeah, so they have kind of different metrics or different. So, just along with that, like, how much does your supply chain play into it versus like what you're doing in your home office? Are they kind of equal, or is there like a weighting based on that, or how does that work?
There is a weighting.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a weighting, and even within a category, like within workers, there will be some kind of checklist items that are weighted more heavily than others. So, for example, I know one that carries quite a bit of weight is what is the wage differential between your highest. I'm so sorry about my nails. These are by my like 2 weeks ago. There. What's the income? What's the wage differential between your highest income earner, and your lowest paid worker?
Oh, interesting.
I know, right? And then there are other questions in the worker section that are also quite highly rated in terms of, you know, benefits, maternity leave. But there might be ones that are worth a little bit less. Say like, do you subsidize transit passes for your employees, right? So, which is like a really cool thing to do, maybe not as important as providing maternity leave.
Right.
And that's kind of replicated across every category. So environment as well. You know, what percentage of our products are using reclaimed or recycled materials versus does your office have a recycling program for batteries? Right? So there are big and there are little e's. And your job is to kind of go through this assessment and collect points as you go. Out of a, I believe it's out of a total of a possible 100, you have to collect 80. That sounds low. But it's not. The 200 it's basically impossible. I think the highest score of any B Corp is somewhere around 140.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty interesting, and I like that that information is publicly available, so you can see, yeah, how different brands rank. I just think that's really nice because when it comes to a lot of certifications, it's either like a yes or no, you're certified, and there's no kind of variation in terms of
Yeah.
like how, yeah, how you scored. So can you tell us a bit about what the process was like to actually get certified?
Yeah, absolutely. It was hard. It was hard. And it's funny because I went through the certification process when I was pregnant with my daughter, my first child, the manicurist. Um, and and the two experiences totally went hand in hand. Like the certification gets harder and harder and harder, and then you're through it. And you know, so it starts with kind of just like a self-assessment, going through the impact assessment, and then deciding if you're close enough that you want to have a review from B Lab. And you can't just go through the checklist and just be approved. Of course, you have to submit like all sorts of documentation to support your answer. So, uh, so for a smaller business, you know, we were really small when we certified. You know, that was a blessing and a curse. Being really small, it meant that I didn't have to go through a whole bunch of levels of bureaucracy to get sign off on certain areas. I know I was speaking to the CEO of Danone, like the yogurt company, the giant like international company. They're B Corp certified. And I was asking her about the certification process, and she was like it took you,
Wow.
you know, to find out, you know, the environmental footprint of their office spaces. You know, for them it took months. For me, it was like, oh, it's this.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go through and collect all the documentation. A big part of what we do with the belts is community donations. Since the beginning, we've donated a ton of belts to like Dress for Success and health and homeless shelters and organizations where people need keep rubbers. And so we had to go back and get written records from the people that we were donating to, like kind of confirming what they had received. And because a lot of that was pretty informal, like an email, you know, hey Jane, do you need more bullets? We were printing out emails like that,
Wow.
right, telling them. So when you submit all of that, then you wait for somebody at B Lab to go through and compare your self-assessment to their assessment. So they might add some points in places, they might subtract some points in places where you thought you were doing a great job and they were actually looking for a slightly different answer. After that, you get feedback and you get a chance to kind of make changes in your company and try again. I think that now I think they give you a window of 6 months or a year to like provide documented, like supported document supported evidence that that you have made those changes. I was lucky; we made it through on the first round, so we didn't have to make any changes in order to qualify. And then then there's just some internal processing time on their end. In the meantime, they provide you a written legal framework to write into your incorporation documents, so that your B Corp standards are literally baked into your business structure.
Oh, cool.
So you have to do that, provide them your new documents, and then then there's a sort of, they call it the ring the bell launch of your company as a B Corp. So you get all the assets that you can use on your packaging, and you get all the brand guidelines. You go up on the website as a member, and you're kind of off to the races. And then you are recertified every 3 years. And we've now gone through the recertification process once. We'll go through it again next year. And it's actually harder than the initial certification.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
what's involved with the recertification then? Do you like submit the same kinds of documents or yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Same kinds of documents. But then if there are any changes in your business's operations, at least this was our experience 2 years ago. If there are any major changes in your business operations, then you also have to support those changes.
Okay.
And so, for example, our headquarters had moved from Shanghai to Edmonton. And so we lost some environment points because now I was traveling across the ocean with suppliers. And we'd also made some other changes in our donation program, so we gained more points there. So everything sort of shifts, but those differentials have to be explained too. So you have the standard assessment plus a justification of adjustments. That said, the assessment is dynamic. It is constantly evolving, based on kind of changing standards for what social and environmental sustainability means.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it is. It is. And so I don't know yet what the research process is going to look like next year versus what I experienced 2 years ago. And I like it. I like it that B Lab as the certifying body didn't just create a set of standards and then sit back and cash in, right?
Yeah.
Like they're constantly doing the work.
I feel like that's incredibly important because especially around things like sustainability, I feel like we're constantly getting new information. There's new science coming out. It's like, oh, we've actually found out that this, like microplastics, I think of, right? Nobody knew about microplastics for the longest time. It was just never something that people even were aware of. And then it became a big thing that we were aware of, right? So as we're learning more information, I feel like it's really important for those kinds of things to be shifting and evolving with information that comes out.
And one thing that I'm really hoping for next year is that, in addition to assessment questions on using recycled and recyclable materials, is there going to be a part of the assessment where we can show our work in building a no waste supply chain? Which to me is just as important as, right, as using recycled materials. Like, are you manufacturing for low waste? And I think that kind of like zero waste movement is something that has kind of emerged and come to the forefront in the past. What do you think? Like, I feel like it's even in the past year, all of a sudden it's huge.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been growing. I feel like, but yeah, over the last 2, 3 years, I feel like 3 years ago it sort of started coming out, and now it's like becoming where there's actually zero waste stores in our city, which is so cool. But so what's the auditing process like though for them to actually verify some of these things that you are saying and you're submitting?
All I know is that I had to supply all kinds of contact information.
Okay.
And when we recertified 2 years ago, and I had a larger team than I did when we originally certified, employee interviews were also a part of the recertification process. So they are looking within and without your organization to kind of support the supporting documents that you have submitted.
Okay. And I'm not sure if you're aware of or not, but do you know if they contacted your factory and suppliers, like if it goes into your supply chain at all?
I know that it does go into our supply chain because we had to provide a comprehensive list of all of our suppliers, and we're lucky because well, I don't, we worked hard for it, so I guess it's not lucky, but we also know our second tier suppliers, so our elastic, our buckles, all of those. So we were able to provide a really long list and the certifications that those factories hold. Um, I don't think they would have asked for it if they don't use it,
Right, yeah.
but they're yeah, but I didn't have insight into exactly like what parts of our particular profile they decided to drill all the way down into and not. But for me, the supply chain transparency and having to supply all of that information about our supply chain, like you don't do that. Like you don't do that if you've got something to hide. Like it involved, for us, it involved collaboration with our factory managers as well. Like, okay, I need to be able to provide certifications that that you're paying the living wages the living wages that you tell us you're paying and that your workers told us that you were paying when we did a site visit. Like we need that on paper. And I think that the fact that B Corp is asking for them and down to phone numbers and email addresses and names indicates to me that it's definitely part of the auditing process. I just don't know if they, for our case in particular, if they called every single factory or half of them. Not sure.
Right, that makes sense. And with something like getting B Corp certified, do you think that that allows brands to learn more about their supply chain, like having to get that kind of information and
Absolutely. And, I think this is really the value of the impact assessment too, like to see what questions they're asking. If you're wanting to look at your business and if you're looking at your business and really wondering like what social and environmental sustainability can look like in your industry, it's such an amazing place to start because yeah, the questions they ask are the ones that we need to be asking ourselves as a business, as businesses, and yeah. So I think that it's a great way to learn more about where you can do better, and B, it's a great way to kind of if you are already doing the work, it's really, really good to see that there's an organization and a community of people who are doing a similar thing and who want to support you, and who want to kind of support you, and also who want to just kind of work as a broader business community to really change the way business is done overall. So yeah.
Yeah, and actually that's kind of a question that I have as well is do you find that with the other B Corps you've talked to and that you know of that there is this idea of wanting to continue to improve, or is it kind of like, oh, we're certified, we're done? Like
No. And B Lab is so clear on that. Is so clear that like this is not the finish line. Like there are within the B Lab within the B Corp ecosystem, yeah, there are 200 points that you can like go out there and get, but outside of the impact assessment, like no, I mean the B Corp community is a community of strivers for sure. And one of the things that I love most about going to B Corp events and connecting online with the B Corp community is that everybody is so humble about everyone wears what they're not doing on their sleeve.
Mhm.
And what's really, really neat about that is that everyone, and again, like from big companies to small companies, it's really, really cool to see big companies sharing resources with littles and saying like, okay, no waste or low waste manufacturing. Okay, Um, here's what we've been able to implement. Here's what we're thinking of doing. Hey, have you played around with something like this? And everyone is so collaborative because, of course, the mindset, it makes so much sense. Like, if the real goal is doing good in the world and using, this is B Corp's tagline, like using business as a force for good, then we should all be helping each other to get there faster, because this isn't a marketing program, right? It's not I'm doing good or you're doing good. I'm doing good and therefore I'll be selling more. I don't want to share any of my secrets on how I'm doing good with you. It's like, no, let's make the world a better place. We are all in business. We are all trading money for services or products. Um, and my view is where money flows, influence flows. Um, so, let's learn how to just do better and better and better with the growing impact we can have as we are trading more money for more goods.
That actually makes me really happy to hear because I feel like quite often, especially in the fashion industry, I encounter this thing where there's almost like two different sides. There's brands who are really transparent and really open and really willing to share information. And then there's the brands who are like, oh, that's our proprietary secret. We can't say
Yeah.
anything. We can't share this because of like, it's sort of this idea that somebody else is going to steal it. But like you said, if you're trying to do better and you're really wanting to help the world, help, garment workers, whoever it is, help the environment, like, wouldn't you want to be sharing some of these things? And I do understand, especially as a small business, it can be hard, especially if you've worked really hard on developing some of these things. But I just have encountered it quite often. And even just like me as sort of a consumer or trying to create content, reaching out to brands and constantly sometimes being stonewalled of them saying like, I can't tell you that, I can't tell you that, that's our company secret. It is frustrating, and I don't know, it just feels a little like, uh, do you really, really care about this? Or is it just sort of this, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think there are two things that feed that. I think that one is this feeling of having to protect what you've built,
Mm-hmm.
and the other is just straight up fear. Like
Mm-hmm.
is this fear of vulnerability and this knowledge that you're not doing everything perfectly, and being worried that you're going to be torn apart by your customer base for what you're not doing, um, which honestly sometimes is a legitimate fear.
Yeah.
Like when you're smaller and you're growing, you don't have the resources to do everything at the same time. Um, and there are many fails to go along with the nails. God knows we have a million. Um, and sometimes we have encountered customers who, for for example, let's say like, well, how sustainable can you be when you're putting a new product into the world? It's like, yep, right. And like we can talk about like how we kind of revive old jeans and how we use recycled materials, blah. Um, or a great example that'll segue into later in our conversation. Like, well, I know that you're using recycled materials and that you have a living wage supply chain and that you do a lot of community giving, uh, and that you're women owned and gender inclusive. But everything that you make is made in China, and um, and so I'm not going to buy from you because of that. Um, or I'm going to blast you on Facebook because of that. And and so it can be a really tough place. It can be really scary to say, this is what we're not doing, when a lot of times our habit, um, especially online when there's a little bit of anonymity, as consumers, is to find the holes, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I get it, yeah, it's super frustrating as a consumer to be willing to take an imperfect answer, um, and instead get no answer.
Yeah. And
Um,
I mean, that's something I do talk a lot about on my channel is that, there's never going to be a perfect brand. Like, there's just no way that that's ever going to happen. And so I really encourage people to focus on the things that they find personally most important. So like if you care really deeply about like fair wages, or maybe you very much care about organic products or whatever it is, like whatever areas that matter most to you, to kind of find those companies and products that fit with your values, because you're not going to find a brand or a product that checks all of the boxes and is some kind of like perfect brand. So I do think like I see it a lot, and honestly people do it to me too, where they're like, how can you recommend this brand when they do this thing? Or there's always going to be holes. But I do also very, very much appreciate when brands say, hey, like this is what we're working on. We're not yet there yet, but we're doing like XYZ, or, we're really proud of these things. We've been able to accomplish this, and we also have these things kind of on the list to tackle. I like that. I think that that shows good foresight. It shows that, that is kind of that progress over perfection mentality, which I really appreciate, versus a brand. And I've had brands come to me and say, we are 100% sustainable. And I'm like, there's no way you're 100% sustainable. Like, that's,
Possible for any of us to be 100%
yeah,
sustainable, like as consumers or as brands. It's impossible. Like we are here on earth and we're consuming resources. And
exactly.
um, I like to think that I'm a responsible and sustainable consumer all the time. Definitely am not. Like definitely yeah, like definitely don't buy, definitely do not grow all my own fruits and vegetables at home, like
Mhm.
um, definitely drive a car. Um, I'm doing, I'm making changes every day, in the way I operate as a consumer, and I want my communities to support that in me as a consumer. And I think, that as an owner of a brand, that's kind of like what that's kind of what I want from our community of brands, and also the people that we're selling to. Um, not to accept a cop out like, well, we're making some progress, um, even though we're not trying very hard, and that should be enough. But like, no, like if you're really working your butt off and you're communicating that about that, I think that, yeah, that deserves support.
Yeah, and that's such a, I mean, that we could do a whole other chat just about that. It is a really weird fine line, but I hope that in general, like you said, that there is this sort of mentality of continued growth, but also that customers understand that, brands are continuing to grow and improve, and it is kind of this flexible thing. And it sounds like B Corp reflects that, which I think is really
Yeah.
great. And I guess let's jump into another question kind of along with that is, do you think like that all brands should be certified? Like if we just think of certifications in general, like what does that tell us about brands? Is that something you think, big companies, small companies, companies in different industries should be trying to do?
At this point, yeah. I do. I don't want to sound like a B Corp zealot, but and in 50 years, I hope that everyone's operating as a B Corp and the certification is a moot point. Um, but in the meantime, I think that there are so many companies doing such good work, and going way beyond what they have to do to just get money in the door. Um, and I think that their consumers need to, and I think that their customers, I think that their customers deserve to know that, like, that they are really like that the work that they say they're doing is supported by evidence, and that somebody outside the business is signing off on that. I think it's a really powerful tool. And I think that, whether you are a business who's already doing the sustainability work, or you're a business who wants to become more of a contributor, to their communities and their environments, and be treating their workers, and their customers better, um, I think this is I think it's kind of the new standard for business. And I think that the number of businesses certifying as B Corps, I think it really reflects that. Like there are, when we certified, there were under 1,000 B Corps, and just a few big ones, and mostly really small ones. And now I think there are almost 4,000. Um, and I, yeah, I think it's a really wonderful community, and I think that it's a very unique certification in that it speaks to the way your business operates and not just the product you sell. Unlike fair trade or unlike certified organic, like those are certifications that you can have as well as B Corp certification. But B Corp right now is the only one that that tells your customers what kind of company you are at your heart and like what values you're living every single day, from what kind of toilet paper you buy to how you offset carbon when you travel, to how transparent your supply chain is. Um, and B Corp is also really unique in how its certification is made so affordable for small businesses. So you can be a one-person business with revenue of, $100,000, and your B Corp certification will cost you $1,000 a year. Whereas if you're Danone, it'll cost you way, way, way more. So there's a sliding scale that is meant to bring in business people from all scales of businesses, which I really appreciate. As a person who started as a, as a one woman side hustle, and our team is still small, but we've grown a lot, and it's nice that B Corp certification is just going to continue to grow with us.
I think that's really interesting, and I want to jump in quickly about that cost thing because I think that comes up quite often. I've heard a lot of brands say like, we are fair trade, but we can't afford to get fair trade certification, or we are, doing this, but we can't afford to get this certification. So yeah, so I was gonna, if you're comfortable talking about it, so it is like a sliding scale
Yep,
cost based thing
and it's
with it.
totally
Okay.
public. It's on their website. Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, so you can see like if you're making 1 billion in revenue, what's it costing somebody to certify as a B Corp versus yeah, if you are an attorney representing under and you're certifying as a B Corp, and you're representing say underprivileged populations or marginalized communities, and you're one person um, with a certain threshold of revenue. Yeah, I think it starts at $1,000. I also, to be honest, wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of subsidy available for very small businesses. Because I know every time I go to a conference or something like that, there are always a number of subsidized tickets available. It's really, really important to B-Lab to make it an inclusive community.
Oh, cool. And so, yeah, so you touched on it a little bit, but like, what's your opinion on like a larger scope certification like B Corp versus a very specific certification? Like, I'm thinking of like fair trade certified, organic certified, like vegan certifications that really narrow in focus on one thing.
Oh, it's hard. I think at the end of the day, the certification is for your customers. It's for your customers' confidence in you. And so I think it kind of depends on who you want to speak to and in what language, if that makes sense. Like if you know that your customers are asking for organic products, maybe that's your priority, to certify the products first, and then later on in the process, when you can afford it, certify your operations. Um, or maybe you have certified organic products, but not operating, you're not operating as a B Corp. Like your operations don't reflect the values in all of those areas, right? Then definitely go for the organic. Um, it's funny, I'm kind of living this right now because we started making cloth masks a few months ago, and the lining of our masks is organic cotton, but we can't call it GOTS certified organic cotton, because we are not certified as like a dealer. Like anyway, it's a long process to be able to put that tag on your product, even if you're buying from a supplier who is GOTS certified. And so that has been a really interesting window into like, oh, okay, like I think it looks to me like this is going to be really labor intensive and expensive. And I can totally understand, like, I don't know, I can totally understand why, if I had to choose between B Corp certification to get sign off on how my whole business was operating, um, versus like waiting however long it's going to take to be able to put a GOTS organic tag on my product. I don't know. In that case, I might opt for B Corp instead of organic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the GOTS one is an interesting example because I know from talking to a GOTS rep that there's a lot of misuse of the GOTS certification because it is really complex. And there is, yeah, this whole different where there's, you can have GOTS certified thread, but the fabric isn't necessarily GOTS certified. And like there's all these different stages throughout the supply chain that need to be GOTS certified.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't necessarily understand how that works, so they might say that their product is GOTS certified when only like one part of the stage of production is GOTS certified.
Right. And we totally messed up on this. I completely messed up. So I knew that the fabric that we were buying was got certified, and I thought,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's just the fabric. Like the fabric's been signed off on. Great. And so in our pre-orders, I had, uh, like inner layer got certified organic cotton. And it was Suzanne who owns Period Isle. They used to be called Luna Pads in Vancouver. And she's absolutely awesome and has been a mentor and a friend. Can I call her a friend? She's so cool. In Vancouver. And she texted me and was like, hey, just a heads up. Like, I don't think this has been a fast turnaround. So I don't think you would have had time to get the sign off that you need to say got certified, and they can come down on you like a hammer. So might want to drop that. And I was like, ooh, thanks. So I, did the research and realized like, oh my gosh, we totally cannot be saying that this is got certified. And yeah, it's super complex. It's
Mm-hmm. It's
yeah,
very complicated. But that and also unfortunately does lead for confusion, like when you get certifications like that are pretty complex, and when the brands don't even necessarily understand fully how to use it, it can get quite confusing for everybody, unfortunately. But I want to kind of shift gears a little bit, and because we're coming up to an hour, and we do have a couple questions. But first of all, what is something that you, as a business, this is something I always really like to hear, something that you're really proud of having achieved, and something that you're also working on? Because, like we talked about before, businesses are constantly evolving and working on different things. So I'd love to know kind of what you're working on.
sure. So something I'm really proud of that is just so recent is the masks, honestly, and what they represent to for me and the team. I am such a perfectionist, and I'm pretty risk averse. And for the first 7 years of business, we had one product and lots of different colors, one product, because I've always feared carrying a lot of inventory and um, yeah. And then we introduced a second, your partners Intrepid belt. Um, and then this past spring with COVID-19, um, our wholesales just bottomed out. Of course, like March, April are really important wholesale months, and that revenue just didn't come as retailers closed instead. And we're looking at layoffs and just a completely like just a kind of a dumpster fire of a business situation. And I'm really proud that what ended up happening is that we realized it's not just us that's taking a hit, it's our suppliers as well. And realizing that, if we were able to pivot to masks, we would be able to keep our revenue going, but we'd also be able to keep making purchase orders from especially our elastic supplier. So we sell elastic belts. We can't afford for our elastic supplier that took years to find to go out of business because they're losing so many apparel company POs, purchase orders. So, fastest product launch ever in Unbelts history. It was, 6 weeks of working days and then working nights to connect with our guy on the ground in Hong Kong. And and the results, they're on the market now, and the reviews are coming back, and everyone is saying that they're comfortable and they're great, and which is just magical. And I'm really proud that all of this really, really careful work we've done for years to build these personal relationships with all of our suppliers, all the way down to our yarn. And the time that we've put into customer service and giving our customers confidence in our ability to provide good products and fast turnarounds. I feel like we wouldn't have been able to do this whole mask thing without planting those seeds as early as 8-9 years ago. And so I'm really proud of that. And it's making us a lot braver about what we can do now going forward. So one thing that we're working on right now that I'm super, super psyched about, we have had a lot of requests over the years for kid-size belts, because our belts are so stretchy and adjustable, and it just makes sense to put them on a person who's growing every day. So those are coming out soon, and then in supporting our low waste supply chain efforts, and our goal of being a really low waste company overall, we're actually going to be doing a pretty big shift to a system of interchangeable buckles and bands. That was, we told anybody that. That's like
Cool.
Yeah. So that we are carrying less inventory, so that if we have a dud color of a band, we haven't spent the human labor sewing it to a buckle, and we can repurpose the hardware to sell with another band. So those are the two things that are in development right now, and we're so excited about both of them.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'm sorry if you can hear my daughter. She just got up for her nap, so if you hear her in the background. That's really cool. I'm very excited about kids' belts. I think that's a fantastic idea, especially because it's so hard to find pants that fit kids, and they're constantly growing, and having something adjustable would be amazing. But I quickly want to jump into the questions because we're coming up to an hour. We just have a couple of questions, and if you guys have any other questions, pop them quick in the chat. But Eleanor wants to know, she says, this may sound dumb, but do you need to be an actual corporation to be certified? Could a single person, an LLC, I suppose, have their practices certified? Do you know anything about that?
A dumb question at all. And as far as I know, yes, you can be certified as an LLC. It'll all be on the B Corp website, for sure. It's just bcorporation.net.
Okay. And Andrea also has a question kind of similar, which she says, she's asking about nonprofits. Is there anything like this certification for nonprofits? So B Corp, I assume, obviously is pretty restricted to corporations. Do you know if there's anything around nonprofits?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. I know it's been a pretty intense debate in the B Corp community for a few years about whether or not there'll be a B Corp style certification for nonprofits. And I know that B Lab's reasoning is that nonprofits have, like, by nature of being a nonprofit, there is already some oversight into how their finances are used. And corporations can't say the same thing. Like, there's no kind of transparency to, like, how and where money is used in corporations, and so that's the problem that B Corp is trying to solve. So no, I'm so sorry, I don't know about that right now. But I'm happy to ask around. If you want to email me at Claire, Claire, at unbelts.com, I'll have your email address, and then if I can come up with some answers, I'll shoot them back to you.
Oh, that's really nice. And also, kind of maybe along with that, though, there is, if you are to looking at nonprofits like charities and a lot of organizations, there are like third-party sites that will kind of review what they're doing, especially when it comes to like effective work, how money's being moved, that kind of thing. So it's not necessarily a certification, but it is, I know that there are like third parties that will look into a lot of nonprofits and organizations and kind of give an overall assessment. So if you are looking at that kind of stuff, especially when it comes to charities, I would say just like do a quick search online for reviews or ratings, or I think a lot of people use, like, I think it's called like effective altruism, and it looks at like which kinds of charities and organizations are using money in most effective ways. So maybe that's kind of along those lines for you, Andrea. I don't know if that helps or not. And I wanted to read a comment too. Kai said that she just wanted to say that she purchased an Unbelt last week and she is super excited to receive it. Got to keep good businesses going.
you. Proud to keep your hand.
And Andrea also says that she loves seeing companies that are always trying to improve on a lot of fronts. So she would rather see a company be like organic and fair wages and various things rather than be perfect on just one front. And I think that's a good, like,
That's
that's, why B Corp I think is a really interesting certification and why I also wanted to learn a lot more about it because unlike a lot of the other certifications that we discuss on my channel, like the fair trade, organic, that kind of things, it is a much more holistic approach to business, which I find very interesting and I think is also really important.
yeah, it's much more about being a responsible citizen, as a business, um, than putting out products that are measurably good in one specific way.
Mhm. And unfortunately, we are running out of time because it's already been an hour. I feel like that blew by.
Oh, I know
Um,
too. I just looked at the
but maybe I mean, I'd love to get into the whole made in China thing. Maybe we can do that some other time if you're at all interested. And
yeah.
please let me know in the comments if you guys would be interested in a conversation around that because I think that that would be a really interesting topic.
And to that end, I think it would be really interesting, and I think that there could be potential to bring in a couple of other businesses that are also manufacturing offshore, to talk about all of our reasons for it. Like I know we did an Instagram live with Little Nudniks in Toronto. They make kids wear out of offcuts in Bangladesh. I know the gals at Poppy Barley are making their shoes and bags in Mexico. There are a lot of there are a lot of companies that are that have interesting reasons for not manufacturing in their own countries. Maybe there's a way to kind of do a little forum so that everyone who's watching is getting multiple perspectives.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to do something like that. So, yeah, we'll definitely touch base and for sure let me know, you guys watching, if that's something that you'd be interested in seeing. Kai already says yes! Exclamation mark, exclamation mark. And before we wrap up, you have a giveaway coming up, right? With some other B Corps, like a little
Yeah,
collaboration. Do you want
thanks
to tell
for
us a bit about that?
Yeah, hop onto Instagram and just follow us. We're just at Unbelts. And this week we're going to be announcing a really fun loop giveaway, with just a tiny little loop of a few Canadian apparel B Corps. So it's us, period aisle that makes reusable, sustainable period products for all genders, which is super cool. And Encircled out in Toronto, and then Poppy Barley here in Edmonton, and us. And I think the whole prize pack's like $1,500. It's insane.
Wow.
So yeah. So just hop on our Instagram and you'll see on our feed and in our stories when that goes live later this week.
That's awesome. So yeah, guys, definitely check that out. Thank you so much, Claire, for joining me. This was really fun, and I definitely learned a lot more about B Corps.
Um, yeah, and anyone who's watching, if you've got any more questions, please don't be a stranger. You can DM us on Instagram, or again, my email is claire@unbelts.com.
That's awesome. And thank you guys so much who jumped in the chat. I really appreciate it. Been reading your comments and stuff. So that's awesome to hear. I love doing these live events. I think they're really fun. They're definitely different than a regular scripted video, but it's always nice to chat with somebody else instead of me just chatting to the camera. So thank you to everyone who joined us. And we are going to wrap that up. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.